Your food, your money. This is Rip Off Britain. Now, what could be more quintessentially British than taking afternoon tea? Sitting in dainty surroundings, sipping from the finest china and nibbling away on a freshly made cucumber sandwich, possibly with a vicar lurking in the background. It's a tradition that's been around since the 1830s. But these days, tea time rarely comes cheap. And those who do fork out for the luxury experience sometimes end up thinking it wasn't really worth it. Because if you want a genuine upper crust tea, the finer details, such as how those sandwich crusts are cut, apparently make all the difference. So here's a handy guide to how it should be served and how much you should expect to pay for it. The origins of what we now know as the traditional afternoon tea lie in the upper-class drawing rooms of the early 19th century. In those days, dinner was served fashionably late, but when the then Duchess of Bedford complained about feeling hungry in the afternoon, the tea was born, and it wasn't long before all of high society was filling its boots. Now, of course, we can all aspire to enjoy afternoon tea, and in recent years, doing just that has become hugely popular. Some of the most prestigious venues can be booked up weeks in advance. While at the other end of the scale, the high street store Patisserie Valerie last year sold over 130,000 of them, coining them in a cool £2.3 million, nearly twice as much as the previous year. Margaret Boyd from Gateshead and her friend Anne are big fans of a classic afternoon tea.
Oh, that's lovely. The perfect afternoon tea for me would have to be a nice, well-dressed table, nice china, fine bone china, delicately cut sandwiches and small sort of scones.
But a recent outing with some friends left Margaret feeling distinctly underwhelmed.
I expected to have fine china and it wasn't. It was just the normal, ordinary catering china. The scones were a bit rock hard, had been warmed up, and I think they'd been warmed up too long. And then the selection of cakes, which I thought would be a bit more fancy, just like a macaron and a lemon tart and a little tiramisu. It was not quite what I expected. I was disappointed.
Now, if you think Margaret was just being fussy, you're wrong. There are very particular rules on how a proper afternoon tea should be served, not to mention what should be in it, and they don't include tiramisu. But Margaret's by no means alone in finding her afternoon treat left a rather sour taste. Online review sites are full of outraged comments from other customers, either about what their tea included or how much it cost. And it's not unreasonable to expect the best when, chances are, you're going to be paying a very pretty penny for the privilege. Margaret's hard scones and tiramisu cost nearly £20 per person. So, just how much should an afternoon tea set you back?
I've never paid more than £25, £30 for afternoon tea.
If it were just sandwiches and tea, then yeah, okay. Well, let's call it £12 or something like that.
It's a very special occasion, I'd pay £20.
For a few pounds, that's fine, but much more than that, it seems like it's very expensive.
Now, you will, of course, pay more if there's Prosecco on the side. But we want to stick with tradition and try and establish the cost of the classic afternoon offering, which typically includes tea, freshly cut sandwiches, scones and homemade treats. If you were buying the ingredients from a supermarket, you'd pay just over £5 a person. But of course, when you go out for tea, you're paying for the service, the ambience and the sheer indulgence, all of which might cost you around £12.50 a person on the high street. However, choose a ritzier venue and the sky's the limit. The priciest we've come across is at the famous Claridge's Hotel in London, where a traditional afternoon tea will cost you a breathtaking £60 per person. But for that price, you'll be treated to the creations of pastry chefs with a world-class reputation in rather splendid Art Deco surroundings where the rich and famous have taken tea for over 150 years. But if it's hard to put a definitive price on an afternoon tea, how easy is it to judge what you should be getting for your money? Well, we've come to York, in the region which drinks more tea than any other, to find out if the locals' love of a good brew will help them identify what should come with it. According to a website devoted to afternoon teas, there are specific treats that must be included for the fully authentic experience. Let's see if the shoppers here can guess which of this selection are on the list, starting with, of course, the key ingredient.
It's got to be, well, tea, obviously.
Correct, but in an afternoon tea it should always be loose and never in bags.
Got to have some cottage cream and jam with the scone.
Yeah.
Also right, scones are a staple on any self-respecting cake stand, and clotted cream is the ideal accompaniment, but our next shopper isn't quite so au fait with the finer details.
I'm a savoury person, so the sandwiches would have to be a priority, and I think the crust, I think, is probably the best bit, actually.
Uh-oh, afternoon tea sandwiches should be strictly crusts off.
Should it? No, definitely crust on. I mean, why did loaves have crusts in the first place, if that's the case? You know, it should have been designed without crusts.
Oh, cupcakes would sound good. Mousses, they sound good.
Oh dear, it may be our shopper's birthday, but it's a big fat no to those cupcakes. It's a selection of handmade cakes and pastries that you should expect to be served, so the shop ones we took out probably wouldn't make the cut either. And she can kiss goodbye to that chocolate mousse too.
Oh, yeah, but I like chocolate mousse.
But what about a bit of fizz?
Champagne, prosecco. We've never had prosecco, so we'd say champagne.
Cupcake.
Well, in a truly traditional afternoon tea, that's a no-no too. In fact, from the products on offer, only 5, the scones, pastries, loose leaf tea, crustless sandwiches and dainty cakes, are bona fide. The rest, including those tea bags, are all strictly off limits. But one man in no doubt about what you should be getting is Grant Harold.
A traditional afternoon tea is a light meal, and it's not a state banquet.
A butler for over 2 decades, Grant was a member of the royal household, and his services are in demand across Europe when it comes to defining the traditionally British ways of doing things. So who better to test a range of teas to see if they're up to scratch? We sent Grant to 5 Manchester establishments that advertise a traditional afternoon tea, but at very different prices. Each time, after sampling the atmosphere and the service, he sneaked out the food itself to bring back to a special location, our very own tasting HQ.
When it comes to afternoon tea, it's not just about the food and drink. Other factors come into play, such as the perfect setting, the perfect ambience, and of course, the wonderful service. Thank you.
So how does he rate the first tea, which came from a tea room and cost £18.95?
Lovely ambience, very friendly staff, but I warn you, you have to wait for a little while to be seated, and even when you sit down, the service can be slightly slow. I was very impressed with the array of teas that they had. In fact, when I asked for some China tea, the lady said, "Which kind would you like?" The downside is I wasn't offered any lemon with my Earl Grey. As far as presentation goes, as you can see, there's a wonderful array of sandwiches, scones and some cakes. Now, the scone does look slightly overdone. And finally, the bruschetta, don't quite know how that fits in. Overall, I'll award it a 7 out of 10.
Next was the most expensive of the lot, a £23 affair from a hotel chain. It too had a couple of additions Grant didn't approve of, including that wrap. But its selection of carefully crafted handmade cakes meant he scored it rather better.
On the downside, I was only offered 1 sandwich, so if you've got a savoury tooth, maybe not a good idea to visit. But overall, I would give it a 9 out of 10.
Right at the other end of the price scale was a tea from a coffee house costing £12.90 a head. Here Grant did get more sandwiches, but on this occasion he wasn't impressed.
It was the worst cup of tea that I've had today, and as you can see from the selection in front of me, they do offer quite a few bits, but the finger sandwiches, well, it puts a whole new meaning into fingered sandwiches. Overall, I'm sorry to say that I'll be awarding it a 5 out of 10. Perhaps they were just having a bad day.
But when it came to a £22 tea from one of the city's smarter hotels, Grant was purring mainly.
The ambience is very traditional, and I even noted people dress up for this experience, which is lovely. The staff are very friendly, I was served very quickly. And again, as you see, there's a wonderful selection in front of me. The tea, I must add, was very delicious. The downside for me was the china was very commercial. The sliced lemon from my china tea, it looked more like something I'd be putting in my gin and tonic. And the tea strainer looked like something out of one's Christmas cracker. So overall, I'd award it a 9 out of 10.
Thanks to its lovely atmosphere and selection of sandwiches, that was Grant's favourite of the teas he tried. He did attempt to sample another one at a city centre hotel chain, but was scandalised by what happened next.
Well, I can safely say I'm absolutely shocked. I've just gone in there to get my 5th and final tea, and they've said that afternoon tea's stopped, but it's 4:20 now, and traditionally I teach people that tea is normally between 4 and 6, so I don't quite know what to say.
Well, that particular establishment told us that though it advertises afternoon tea as being served between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m, it will try to meet requests for tea outside of these times with advance notice. Well, as you know on this programme, we're not in favour of paying more for anything without good reason. But Grant did find that in this particular test, he got what he paid for. It was the pricier afternoon teas that he enjoyed the most. And that's because he says they followed his key principles, which are ambience, good service, and a wonderful array of the correct food. Then there's the etiquette around how a proper afternoon tea should be served. And it seems there are quite a few traditions that we should observe when tucking into one. Grant has picked out the 3 he considers the most important, beginning with how to drink the tea itself.
When it comes to stirring the tea, remember it's a back and forward motion. We're not going to go around in circles because we're not creating a mini tsunami. When it comes to the etiquette of a scone, always remember that you place the jam and the cream just onto the side of the plate because we're not trying to create some sort of ghastly sandwich. And finally, we come to napkin etiquette. And what this means for ladies, the crease is away from you, so you can pick up the corner and dab. Remember, we dab, we never wipe. Gentlemen, the crease can be towards you and on your lap. Chin chin.